Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic, the hidden psychology of why we lose respect. Have you ever felt like you're literally doing everything right as a leader, yet your team or colleagues just seem to look right through you? It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, the good news is the answers aren't a mystery. They are rooted deeply in behavioral psychology. Today, we're unpacking this concept of quiet authority. We're going to analyze some really common leadership mistakes and learn exactly how to stop the psychological leaks that are quietly draining your credibility. Let's get into it. So, why do people look right through you? This brings us to a massive misconception we need to clear up right away. A lot of us think respect is just automatically earned the moment you get a fancy job title, a higher salary, or some elevated status. But psychology tells a totally different story. Studies actually show that humans decide whether they respect someone within the first fraction of a second of an interaction. That's way before they ever see your LinkedIn profile or know your job title. Respect just isn't handed to you with a promotion. And when people stop listening to you, it's almost never because of one massive catastrophic failure. It's actually something far more subtle. The truth is, it's a quiet erosion caused by subtle habits long before anyone says a word. I want you to think of your leadership credibility like a massive, powerful ship. Now, a ship doesn't usually sink because it suddenly split in half, right? It sinks because of tiny, totally unnoticed leaks below the waterline. People don't lose respect for you all at once. They lose it because of specific, subtle attitudes and habits that are quietly destroying your authority, literally leaks in your ship, long before anyone ever confronts you about it. So let's figure out how to start plugging those leaks. Leak number one is what we call the "I already know" trap. This happens the moment a leader loses their curiosity, and the root of it is the Dunning-Kruger effect. You've probably heard of this. It's when people with limited competence act with absolute total certainty, simply because they lack the self-awareness to see their own knowledge depths. It is a wildly dangerous blind spot. Listen, as a leader, when you stop being curious and you start acting like you have absolutely nothing left to learn, your team doesn't suddenly look at you like you're some wise oracle. They just see you as loud, stubborn, and completely out of touch. It really comes down to rigid thinking versus true intelligence. On one side, rigid thinking blocks your growth and makes your perspective feel incredibly small to everyone around you. On the other side is true intelligence, which psychology actually defines by a willingness to question oneself. True quiet authority comes from having the confidence to look at your team and say, you know what, I don't know, let's figure it out together, rather than pretending you hold all the answers. All right, moving on to leak number two, the cost of victim energy. This is the blame trap, and we see it absolutely everywhere in corporate environments. Think about the manager who misses their Q3 targets and immediately points the finger at the marketing team, the algorithm, or the strict corporate budget. They take zero ownership. Here is exactly why this destroys your authority. Humans are biologically wired to value agency. Agency is your ability to take responsibility for your own life and your own outcomes. When you strip yourself of agency by playing the victim, you are completely stripping yourself of respect. The result of all that blame is something psychologists call emotional contamination. It's a profound negative energy drain. When you constantly frame yourself as helpless, you quite literally contaminate the emotional space of your team. It just drains their energy. It actually causes colleagues and direct reports to subconsciously distance themselves from you. You essentially become a leaky ship that others simply don't want to sail on. Now, for our third leak, the people-pleasing paradox. This is a deep irony where the very things you do to gain respect actually destroy it. The people-pleaser relies on always agreeing, over-apologizing, and constantly saying yes to every single request. To really understand how destructive this is, let's look at a case study of a leader named Sarah. Sarah desperately wanted her new team to love her, so she never pushed back. She agreed to completely impossible deadlines and aggressively apologized whenever her team felt stressed. She really thought she was being highly supportive. But in reality, this behavior sent a crystal clear signal to her team. Her boundaries were entirely negotiable. By trying way too hard to be liked, Sarah completely dismantled her own authority. Closely tied to Sarah's situation is this habit of over-explaining. Did you know that every time you try to over-justify a simple leadership decision, your brain quite literally releases stress hormones? It's true. And why is that? Because you're operating from a primal survival instinct to avoid rejection. You aren't explaining to clarify things for your team, you are over-explaining because you're terrified they won't like the decision. Because here's the thing, over-explaining signals pure doubt to your audience, while direct communication signals unshakable confidence. To fix her leaky ship, Sarah had to learn this the hard way. She had to learn the immense power of stating a simple decision once, clearly and directly, and then just stopping. No rambling justifications, just the decision. That silence after a direct statement, that is exactly where quiet authority lives. Leak number 4 is conversational narcissism. This is a subtle arrogance that absolutely ruins credibility. Psychologists classify this as social dominance behavior. It's an insecure attempt to assert superiority through conversation. You see this when someone makes literally every story their team tells about themselves. Or, when someone pretends to give advice, but they're really just trying to show off their own past accomplishments? Yeah, that's it. It's a transparent play for status that actually lowers your status in the eyes of everyone listening. And paired right along with that dominance behavior is interrupting. Interrupting signals a profound lack of cognitive patience. When you do this, it tells the room that you prioritize your own speaking over actual mental processing. Real respect doesn't come from speaking more or being the loudest voice in the meeting. It comes from knowing when to listen and, frankly, knowing when to stay quiet and just process the information. Okay, we've diagnosed the leaks. Now for step 5, projecting true quiet authority. First, we have to bust a major myth, this idea of invisible effort versus visible integrity. A lot of leaders think that staying incredibly humble, hiding behind the scenes, and silently suffering is what makes people admire them. Well, the research says they won't. Respect doesn't come from silent suffering, it comes from visible integrity. If you're always hiding your efforts just to avoid judgment, you are also hiding the very standards that your team could admire and follow. You absolutely have to set standards through your behavior visibly. So let's get practical. Here are your actionable steps to patch the ship and stop the leak once and for all. Step 1, speak directly and stop. Beat that people-pleasing paradox by giving clear directions without over-justifying every little thing. Step 2, listen to process, not just speak. Overcome conversational narcissism by demonstrating cognitive patience. Actually let others finish their thoughts. And step 3, show visible integrity. Don't hide your hard work. Show up, speak clearly, and let your everyday actions set the baseline for your team. Which brings us to our final and maybe most powerful thought. Respect is a signal. Stop chasing validation. At the end of the day, you just cannot demand respect. It is a signal you broadcast through your behavior. The very moment you stop desperately chasing validation from your team and start living strictly by your own principles and clear communication, you are going to notice a massive shift. You don't have to force people to respect you. They just naturally will. So I'll leave you with this question. What is the one difficult conversation you've been avoiding today because you're afraid your team won't like you? Remember that silence is exactly where your quiet authority is waiting to be built. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.